Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce our presenters, Iñaki Ábalos and Renata Sentkiewicz, to you. Iñaki Ábalos is a PhD in architecture and chaired professor of architectural design at the ETSM SAM since 2002. Currently, he is professor in residence at the Harvard GSD. He is a co-director of Ábalos and Sentkiewicz Arquitectos and the director of the Laboratorio de Técnicas y Paisajes Contemporáneos, LTPC, since 2002. In 2009, the RIVA awarded him its international membership. Renata Sentkiewicz is a Master of Science by Krakow Polytechnic School of Architecture. Currently, she is the design critic at the Harvard GSD since 2012. Iñaki Ábalos and Renata Sentkiewicz have worked together since 1999, first as Ábalos and Herreros and since 2006 as Ábalos and Sentkiewicz Arquitectos. The work they developed stands out for proposing an original synthesis of technical rigor, formal imagination and discipline, integration between the architecture, environment, and landscape, an approach they have named as Thermodynamic Beauty. Ábalos and Sentkiewicz Architects with the offices in Boston and Madrid stands out in the contemporary scene as one of the few international firms able to combine a deep sense of authorship with a systematic and collaborative attitude involving the design process from the very first step with the professionals of different fields. Clients, institutions, something reflected in the success of their built work, both in the urban realm and the specialized media. So please welcome today's guests, Iñaki and Renata.
Thank you, Hitoshi, for the presentation and for the Spanish pronunciation. Thanks for having me. What do I do with this? I cannot. And thank you everyone for being here and this lecture. I mean, we want to present some of our recent work and want to do it with a prism that tries to project it to the future instead of to the past. And basically we're going to focus on our research, both academic and professional, in the idea of a high-density city and the idea of the heritage of modernist high-rise tradition. Something like that. Okay. This is this is a project made by the Corbusier, very young. For Paris, it was a brutal proposal, super provocative, and it was an attempt to overpass all the ideas that were Americans dealing with in those days, and trying to introduce some kind of rationality to the, let's say, unrational development of Chicago and New York and other cities. And it was really a very young, almost fascist. It can be said very clearly, not a project, a beautiful one, but almost fascist in its brutal destroyment of some of the most important areas of the old city of Paris. And I just want to contrast this with this other image, a sketch made by Le Corbusier 30 years later in his maturity, when he became more interested in exploring the idea of interior space and exploring the idea of escaping architecture instead of flying. And in the first period of his life, he was obsessed with the object, the idea of let's say, an assemblage as a Fordist production of the skyscraper, and the idea of floating in the space with the pilotis and all this almost tectonic development of his first part of the career. While from this moment on, he became more and more interested in the sculptor. He was very fascinated with the idea of dark interiors, the materiality, organic materiality, concrete, the soleil, or the brutalist use of concrete, etc., etc. I mean, all of us know this story, but I think that it's very clear that and it's something that is happening in many architects, that they begin to fly, when they're like Icarus, when they are young, and they want to really make like lighter things, and then in a moment they stop and begin to negotiate with the earth. And this is just a first frame of the lecture. The other one is the texts that I've been dealing with, and some of them made with Renata, and some of them are translated in Spanish and into English, some are not, that in a way describe the trajectory we've been dealing with, from analyzing the modernism from 3 different perspectives. The Tower and Office book was a book that dealt with the technical heritage of modernity. The Good Life was more about again the heritage of modernity in relationship with private space and with the relationship among space and time, space and philosophy, how ideas affect the way we understand space in the space of infinity. Atlas Pintoresco, which is not translated, was an attempt to deal with the idea of nature in relationship with all the modernist projects. So these 3 books are composed a kind of big side on our heritage and how can we deal with it from the cultural perspective that is more focused in the present and in the future than in the past. And Thermodynamics applied to high-rise and mixed-use prototypes is a very recent booklet, I would say, published at the ESD that summarizes our work in these years in the ESD in relationship with how much thermodynamics can affect the idea of high-rise and how much we are assisting to, let's say, not a change of paradigm, that is an expression that I hate, but a shift, I would say, of ideas from a turn or a shift, if you want, from the tectonic tradition to a way to understand architecture, more still focusing scientific paradigms, but more like shifting from the tectonic tradition to the thermodynamic principles. And I bring these books not to make a kind of advertisements of my books, but to say that the first and the last are focused on high-rise. But in a moment we discovered that if we could put one on top of the other, the 4 of them could compose by themselves an ideal contemporary high-rise building. And so it's composed of some technical stuff, it's composed of some ideas on the relationship among space and time, and some new ideas on how our dwellings should be. It's composed of some relationship, a kind of problematizing the relationship among nature and the artificial matter, and also it's about rethinking this very young typology. It has only 160 or something like that years. So, I mean, reconsidering completely this typology from the perspective of thermodynamics instead of just the elevator, the structural grid, and all the stuff that was important at the end of 19th century in Chicago. So this is what we will talk about, this kind of ideal project, made obviously with all the contingencies that the real practice brings to our office every day. And also we want to focus, and I will stop on this kind of theoretical frame. We want to focus in 2 topics. In our understanding, there are like 4 topics that have to be reviewed. One is the notion of subject, under the prism of thermodynamics. What implicitly, I mean, if we want to develop this idea in architectural terms, which implications it has. I think one is this reconfiguring the subject more in relationship with its somatic and his somatism, let's say our neuroterminals, and how we react to heat, damage, fear, all these things that are incredibly associated with our constructions as individuals and also as collective, social individuals. So the second point is the technique of designing with these prototypes that we want to deal with. We call this assemblage of monsters, remembering Frankenstein and how Maria Shelley, the author, described the construction of a monster and trying to bring some kind of ugliness into the debate of the beauty. The third point is how this typology is not let's say the vertical typologies are not anymore just obsessed with slenderness or the phallic symbolism. I think that the combination of a kind of exterior gaze and an interior construction, a kind of dialectical battlefield has become a kind of crucial aspect of the reconsideration of this typology. And then the last one is how much material is the notion of matter and how it is affected when we focus on things like diffusivity, conductivity, emisivity in the materials, or we just consider the air and how we move the air inside the building as one of our most important materials to design space. So, well, this is the frame. Then the reality, which is always much more poor. But let me begin this talk with about high-rise with the first grotto, the first caverns of human beings, and a beautiful portfolio made by Breda and Rosa, two Spanish photographers, well known in Europe. And they just traveled the whole world trying to see what our first parents or grandparents and etc. saw when they were living in the caverns. And the idea that in our somatism, the first thing is the idea of the cave, the idea of the grotto, for the protection of the interior. It's an amazing, beautiful dossier of volume. And always you see, I mean, this is what they see. We are in Java. The position is always in a kind of balance among controlling the space through some elevation and being close to the water, to the food, basically. So defensive and at the same time metabolic. And this is, and usually many of them, the most famous are oriented, the gate of the cave is oriented to the south, at least in the north part of the globe. So they have this kind of balance among let's say, the low temperatures inside and the heat outside. I mean, and then we just jump like a lot of years and go to these devices designed by Alphan in 19th century in Paris, Ville-Chaumont, the first picturesque park in Paris, which began to deal with, let's say, this sinusoidal meandric paths, but also changing a mine. It was a mining area. The Ville-Chaumont is the stone that all the 19th century houses in Paris are made of, and changing the whole stuff into a kind of picturesque devices. I think that this beautiful grotto that is still there, and that was one of the. And by the way, it was one of the favorite places of Le Corbusier. He retired there when he was really tired of meeting people or wherever, just to think alone. This beautiful cavern is for us a kind of interesting reference in our work, because it brings a kind of intimacy of dialogue with nature that doesn't come when you just go up and control the panoramic view. It happens basically in the modernist hour. This dialogue that the body establishes with the grotto can be described technically or thermodynamically, if you want, as an interchange. I mean, we change our situation. Usually we are radiated by the sun, so we are the cold body and the sun is the heat. And when we enter into this mass of the earth, the role is reversed, and we begin to radiate to the Earth. And this is why we always feel more cold than the temperature shows us. And because in a way, this kind of relationship affect all our somatism. And this related with humidity and all this amount of matter around us is very impressive, not only for experts, but for all kinds of children to all people. And it's something that affects intensively our relationship with nature. There are other devices that the picturesque paint brought into our ideas as architects, this kind of combination of a tree and a spiral that has been so successful in these last decades and so many ugly architectures. And this other one with the cave and the windmill that looks like the first sustainable construction that has water, wind, nature, earth, and almost all the four elements combined in a kind of device. And also brought the idea that we could jump into the sky and break the cornice, the classical cornice, and begin to construct observatories. I mean, it's or even more dramatic, like Gothic churches for our houses. No? But there are many other traditions like the Expressionist paint or the Levique that I'm not going to enter into. And obviously we jump into Le Corbusier. And from Le Corbusier, we can come now to this, I would say, seminal project of contemporary architecture. I think it's not only in the work of Homey, but also in the work of almost all of us. It was a complete change of situation in the way we could think, and many of these things I've been talking about. You know, this reversion of the, let's say, the high-rise to an interior, this idea of excavating, instead, this idea of an artificial environment where we excavate our spaces, public spaces, in a kind of vertical promenade or let's say, succession of growth. Well, and with this, I just wanted to bring this kind of discussion that at the same time introduces some tectonic ideas and aesthetic ideas and something like that. So this, I begin with the first project we made together, Renata and I. She will be speaking later, now it's my turn. and a competition that obviously we knew we were not going to win, and that we didn't believe that it had any sense to compete for winning. It was in this unbelievable place in the surroundings of Madrid that has nothing at all, and they wanted to create let's say, convention center and a hotel that could become an attraction for everyone. And we just began to work very intuitively, just for the pleasure of drawing, I would say, and with the idea of combining a set of very standard towers and a massive, let's say, can I say elevated grotto? I don't know, excavated potato, I don't know exactly what. But we knew it had to be massive, and the other thing had to be like fragile, crystalline. And in a way, there was a basic, a lot of need to draw, and a very basic idea that thermodynamism, in a way, introduced a diversity of materiality into the project, in the sense that we need, once you think in terms of energy, you always need some parts that need to collect or store heat gains, and other parts that need to capture energy and negotiate instantly with the climatic changes. So in a way it was a metaphor of a new materialism that combined the crystalline surface of the prism with the organic potato thing. And then here without any kind of idea that the picturesque, the growth, etc., just for fun, we began to think and to draw this. I will run as in a flipbook on different ways. Obviously the axis was by car, and then there was a kind of labyrinth of movement and a kind of ballet, choreography, where you could find some cultural centers, some leisure centers, car park, obviously, some archives, cinemas, and then in the middle of the potato shade we had a real park that collected sand and the water and had like a kind of connection, like an outlook space, a connection with the surroundings, and and then we jumped into the upper part. More cars, more buildings, more cars, more potato. And it was obviously there was a tectonic, like a complementary relationship. The towers were supporting, and the towers had just one room every floor. The lower part was for storing different materials, and the upper were the rooms, and they were done like carefully and trying to extract the most pleasant spaces for just one room in a very small space. And that's it. This is our first project. Then we had the opportunity in Ábalos and Herreros still, but as Renata was an associate there from the first year, to draw some fragments of this idea, like this tower that was a kind of mixed use, that negotiated with the urban real that was built in Canary Islands, that was a combination of different programs, but at the same time wanted to jump and relate itself with the volcanoes surrounding and to relate its alley, I would say, with the surrounding, not with the surrounding urban fabric, but with the same more topographical or geographical relationship and change. I mean, to hide the real scale into a super redundant display that changes the scale of the surfaces and negotiated with sand with this kind of scaleless device. Here you can see more or less this relationship with the beautiful surroundings. And this other that at least we could experiment. It was a public housing competition we won and was built in Vitoria in the north of Spain in a very cold weather. It's the Spanish Chicago. And we just were in front of even a more frozen scenario, which is a kind of swamp with water and a protected landscape that we could experiment with pivoting like our slabs and creating some special effects and extending the water as our, let's say, landscape of the plot, so duplicating like Narcissus, no? The scale of the very simple towers. No? This is example. Very less basic construction system. And then we began a couple of years later to experiment in a more, let's say, technical way with these ideas, but this is the turn of Renata. Please, Renata.
I will try to follow smoothly after Iñaki. This is a project in Paris. It was related with a political project of Sarkozy. It's called Grand Paris, to make new line of metro, which is surrounding Paris and connecting all kind of suburbs. So it was a moment to investigate what future station of metro could be. This is very simple first drawing. So we start just from the beginning. This is just platform. But in the moment that we think what kind of new public space it could be the metro, we start to investigate if this space, this public space, could deform and could go up, could cross the line of the ground and grow up as a building. So this is a very simple exercise. We could see the same kind of tube became kind of patio, kind of void that perforates the building. It's our first sketches how the building could look like, how the underground and overground space could intersect, and this public vertical space could relate at the same time with the infrastructure and at the same time with the public program up. So we start to play with the space going up. This is important data also that we're working with new system of metro. So the train is enclosed in kind of glass tube, so it's no pollution, no noise. At that moment, this public space, this air, can be used in very different way. We collaborate with designer Jasper Morrison, that you know perfectly, I guess, who bring this kind of relation with historical ceramic elements in the ground space. He was working in the part which is much touchable, like first kind of layer. And these elements we start to bring up, going up into the building, changing the form. This is still ceramic. You see that these are kind of ceramic lattices, white, but they can deform and they can follow this more complex geometry which is going up. At the same time, they can be more near and more farther to each other. So the relation with the light, getting it in, and reflection of the light could be more complex. This is our first kind of geometry we're working with. And how it could go up. These are just sequence of axonometric of different floors. So you could see this is a public space which is completely open, that can happen different kind of activities. And it just perforates through different elements which are communication voids. And up we put the building after I've explained this very specific form. Here you can see what we were thinking, that this could be like, should be kind of icon. So the new metro station will bring kind of new public space that can become new kind of significant place for meeting for people. This is abstract kind of geometry of this suburb town. So what we wanted to play is with the same height. This is this basic, more massive volume. But once we go over the line of surrounding architecture, we play with these towers that became iconic and became a sign in the urban space. Here you could start to see the section. It's quite. You see how the void of metro go up and turn and surround. It's surround through a cultural program. This is kind of public library, kind of dia shop, you could say. And all kind of devices of transportation. There are electric cars, buses, bicycles, etc. And over the towers, they are dwellings and offices. Go fastly through different floors. Just to see how it's constructed one by one. This kind of first materiality of that, how it could look like. The space up, the interaction directly with the infrastructure. And these some schemes which are quite important. This one, the second one I will show now. When we start to think what kind of character could have this space. Here we are thinking about natural light, how we can bring it inside. It's not to get really natural lighting, of course. It's quite impossible. But you can have like glimpses of natural light. What it means that the character of light change between the morning, midday, and the afternoon. So this is what's the name of? Heliostat, yeah. This is the heliostat that capture the light. You can see in the schemes for these towers like the form. to get the light in 3 moments of the day, which is a higher use of the metro in the morning, midday, and in the evening. So we bring these kind of colors or different tones of light into the space. And this section is a bit unsharp, but I will explain it. So in this project, we will start to think about this idea after we develop in the university. I will show some works of students, which is what kind of potentiality can have the infrastructure at this kind of public space, when at the same time we have first subway, but it's kind of underground system of geothermal. So we have this huge geothermal system which goes underground through all the city. We have a critic mass of public, which is used in this Dia Center, which is a public library and culture center. And at the same time, we have this in-between space that could be used as exchange of different elements, of different energy and heat which are produced in all these different programs. So in this moment we start to study how we could create kind of chain of exchange of energy which could work along of 24 hours. So we have different time for dwellings, different time for culture center, different kind of heat that we can get from infrastructure. And if we could have a kind of balance between all these programs along of 24 hours, and the heat during the day produced in the public program could be used in the dwellings during the night, for instance. So this void, this in-between space, start to work as an exchanger, heat exchanger, that always was interacted with all kind of heat production through culture program and the infrastructure. And this energy, this heat, through aluminium kind of corrugated surface, was recollected during the day and was taken during the night to the dwellings. There are some images, of course, with Eiffel Tower, the view. And here I bring some examples how farther we get this idea of exchange of energy, and how farther we try to introduce kind of thermodynamic protocol into academy, into the process of design, to work with the students, but also to find a kind of way how we could work with thermodynamics from really beginning of the process of design. Normally we are used to very complex kind of softwares when you can check your building, how it's working. But what happened with these softwares, that you can check it once the building is made, but you can't interact with them. So we're trying to think how we can work with thermodynamics in more analogic, we could say, more direct and more interactive way. So these are some works of students when we start to introduce kind of protocol. That the important thing of this was that clearly what's important that we cannot deal with thermodynamic as all at the same time because it's too complex. So we need to divide it to smaller questions and go one by one, trying to answer independently. And once we have all these different answers, we can join them together, what we call assemblage of monsters. This is this specific moment when all this data from different research get together and became kind of beginning of a project, even they are still not architecture. So we discover in this moment and this process, this kind of beings, but we can't call them yet architecture. They are still not something done or defined. They are like kind of work in progress, kind of prototypes that can become still different things. No? So we start to think that we could call them kind of monsters. So you have here one example. But at the beginning of the process, what was important, if we want to work with thermodynamics, we need to understand the grammar of it. What means grammar? Grammar if we talk about lexico and if we talk about graphics also. Both things we think are the same important. So these are just basic process of transmission of heat, conduction, convection, and radiation, as you can see here. So first element, it was start to study them to understand how we can use them inside of an architectural discipline. So these are very specific, very different configuration when we can play with red and white, the heat and cold elements, to try to find exchange between them. And these are like first studies, research about what these three processes, convection, conduction, and radiation are. What it means, this is important like a physics kind of function, we could say, but we are talking about geometry, we are talking about the distance, we are talking about the time. So directly there is relation between the space and the geometry, how the energy moves in different and in each of these processes. But also there is direct relation with the human body. Iñaki was mentioned before. Finally, the architecture we are making for the people. So the person could be like the starting point. So what is relation between the space, between the radiation, convection, and conduction when we talk about human body. And here also start to appear, this was one of the difficult things that we still study, how we can represent it. We are architects, so we need graphics to talk about it. But when we start to talk about convection and we talk about the Earth, how we can show it graphically, how we can show it in space. So this was another element, important element. So we were studying very simple unit, just 4 by 4 by 4 meters of cube. If we have this, this form, how this form should change to optimize each of this process, convection, conduction, and radiation. And opposite, how this form should deformate to stop this process. So these two geometries, or balance on both sides, they start to give us kind of first glimpses to understand the geometry, relation between geometry of space and the thermal process. We have some examples. I will not go deeper into it. This was one of the questions we were trying to answer. This has very direct relation with the project in Paris. When we talk about the use, about the program, how we can understand it in the thermodynamic way. So we could divide all the uses into groups. They are producers and absorbers. This is very simple Excel chart that in the first column you have what each use needs. Of course, all of them, they need very similar heat at the beginning. But once they became active, when they have activity of human, so you have human radiation, lighting, machines, computers, etc. When you start to make this balance, finally, some of the users, they still produce energy. So basically, they need to dissipate. The character of them, they are like producers. No? And the other ones still need to absorb. So final numbers, they are positive and negative. So we start to think, can we compose, can we think a mixed-use building in different way, not in economic kind of organization on privacy, etc., but kind of mixture of different programs that we balance them because of energy exchange. So this chart here is traduced to a graphic through 24 hours. We are like values per hour, so you could see like what it's how perform each program along of the day. It produces, it absorbs energy. Once we have all of them, this was studied in Madrid and Barcelona, so just to have these two different climates, more coast and more interior, kind of, more humid, more dry. And here it's like first try to balance it. So basically what should happen, that the produced energy up and down should be the same. But this is divided for 24 hours, so we are talking about the surface of it. The surface, up surface and down surface should be the same. Here it's the exchanges along all the day. Mostly what happened, that the up part became active, which is like producers during the day, and during the night you start to need to absorb. So it's unbalanced during 24 hours. This is a chart we go more forward, so you can see much more complex kind of equalizer of different uses and how we can play, how we can perform during the day. So this is kind of device, we are working on it, how we could have very easily and very fast answer as an architect to understand what happened with the building when we have this kind of quantity of square meters in different programs, when we start to mix them. So this became much more complex. And here are some projects that they show different steps in all the process. So there are like units. First, after you can see the what we call thermomixer, when students start to balance different programs and try to find the composition. So you just have square meters or cubic meters in it. And after you put this cube, we could say still abstract, to the specific climate. So you start to understand what kind of climate you have and what kind of potentialities you get in it, and you start to deform your cube. So this is also a completely independent question. What's going on with this form when we think uniquely about exterior kind of relation? So the important thing is understand what the climate means. So as architect, we are trying always to do like a bit of everything, which is completely unproductive. So the important thing is to understand what is the main source. So if we talk about the climate, we were asking the students what we call listing and ranking. So first they have to define what kind of devices, what kind of potentialities, positive and negative they have in the place. Could be positive as sun radiation and winter, but it's the same negative in summer. But when they have all this list, they should put like kind of ranking, so like 5 stars. So what's the most important and the strongest element to deform the form? Because if you have different deformation, they overlap. So we have to know which is the most important deformation in all the process. Here are these like different steps. I will go faster because I think about it. So you could start to see how this mixer start to work, get into inside of the building. On the left down, you could see all possible configuration about absorbers and producers, how they should be organized inside of the buildings, what kind of organization it is. And these are like first attempt to a kind of materiality it could have. This is another example. This, for instance, is clearly the 5 stars in the ranking of climate. It's a wind. So you could see like a form. It's try to capture the wind to get ventilation, natural ventilation through it. This is Barcelona and Madrid. And here I pass.
Okay. And then I mean the last thing of these samples is the experimentation with a kind of new materiality and new ways to deal with air and conductivity inside materials, conductivity, etc. So I will not explain them. I think that the production of new images, some of them not that new, completely passive, almost historical, has been a kind of interesting thing for us. You know, which kind of monsters this kind of organization of our knowledge and our approach to the market and to the public can produce. This is nice because we suspended the gravitation at all during these terms, so no one had to deal with gravitational forces, just with thermodynamic flows. And this is a project we were doing at the same time, a project that is a mixed use in Torino, and beautiful place, as everyone knows, a wonderful city, close to the Alps, and is one of the 3 skyscrapers, small skyscrapers, is 120 meters tall, and that they are dealing with. And so the idea for us was to combine different uses in a kind of rocky organization that is not just metaphorical, it's structural, because this triangular shape has a tectonic role, but at the same time it casts, through this organization we cast shadow on these parts of the program that don't need to deal with sun directly as office space, and so it's a negotiation of the, a kind of passive negotiation among different programs that wrap the whole building or the whole entity, and at the same time those facets that have more sun exposure will become like photovoltaic collectors of heat. And it was just an exercise that was unfortunately second prize. We are very much used to second prizes. And this was first. This was in Logroño. Another has some similarities. Again, the cave or the grotto or whatever you call it was central. It was about creating a new area, a new urban development, using the change to the high-speed train in Logroño in Spain. This is the pre-existing thing. This is the path that the now underground tracks will follow in the city. And so we understood immediately that we had the possibility of creating a kind of green belt in the city, and that it was a political issue. This was the reason why we won. I mean, we didn't design the station, we designed a kind of slope that allowed everyone to have continuity in its green path. And then some small towers around, expanding the slope that has like 2 sides, a garden and a station, and expanding this organization in the space. So here again we have a kind of combination of towers and an organic shape. In this case the organic shape is not floating in the air as was 15 years ago. It was more realistic. Probably this is why we won the competition. And this is the whole thing had these 2 sides, up and down, and shared the same triangular geometry, which is tectonic, but also gave us the possibility of dealing with a very difficult geometry, because the tracks make some strange, bizarre figures down in the ground, underground. So we couldn't have a kind of regular hypostellar room. It had to be regular. Here you see it under construction. And then on top of this, the whole structure is a part that will be open in 1 month when we come back to Spain. And these are the skylights for the platforms of the train, some stuff. And this is the train station. The train station is made with very simple materials, using a combination of aluminum lattices, extruded lattices that sometimes are transparent, and depending on how you move, they become transparent and show you in a way all the tectonic efforts, but at the same time can become opaque, and ceramic tiles that have different degrees of polishment. So everything is activated through the movement of people. It's not a kind of static place. This is the place where the skyline, where you go down to the platforms. This is the area of the train. It is huge for 400 meters long. And the skylights with these mirrors, kind of kaleidoscopic mirror, introduces some light and some patterns, not that repeated patterns that are a kind of an ornamental way to distribute light instead of glaring blue. These are very important drawings, because they were the mediators among all the specialists, engineers, I mean all the staff. It was a kind of pact, it's a consensus drawing. Everyone had to respect these lines, and it took a lot of time to draw them. But this is the layout of you see the columns, never more than 20 meters of span, but at the same time the position is irregular, and they give way to this kind of unfolding of this geometry, which I'm not going to explain. this kind of contrast among the phase of construction and the finishing. The whole idea of the space was to create a grotto. It doesn't need to be said, but at the same time deal with the idea of our body in movement. You always are in movement when you come and go up and down in the station, and instead of having just the simplicity of an extruded section, which is the typical way stations are designed, we wanted to create a complete experience. All these products are commercial. I mean, the only thing is the geometry needed more digital tools, but the price was exactly the same that we do. A little bit more, like percent more than it was just rectangular or flat materials. This is we made it like 1 month ago, a comparison of the scales. I mean, we suddenly thought, I mean, what happens if we just put together, and it was amazing. And we were amazing in 15 years, and we didn't realize that we were dealing with the same idea. And then the second idea we have, because we don't have that many ideas, every morning we have only 0 ideas. Maybe 1 in 5 or 6 years. This is another idea to deal with high-rises, the solution of the compact shape when you lift up the section. So it's a kind of transformation from a compact building into a kind of bundle of towers. And we have dealt with it in 2 or 3 projects, and we want to do that, to work with this. Let me explain. I mean, this idea was an homage to a Spanish architect, Oita, which made one of the 2 most beautiful skyscrapers of Spain. One was completely compact, Oita made the EBA, and the other one is the Torres Blancas, white towers, very similar to Marina Towers in Chicago. So we began to think, what happens if we make another monster, a Frankenstein, a transformation from bottom to top that begins as a compact building and transforms itself into a kind of bundle of towers. And we discovered that they had some structural, aesthetical, and thermodynamic implications. Structurally, it's obvious that the wind increases in speed when you go taller. Everyone knows, everyone at least dealing with skyscrapers. And the idea of the turbulence and not avoiding to have like sharp cuts reduces turbulence and negative pressure. And so in a way, it reduces the impact of the tectonic impact in skyscrapers, but also the consumption of steel, and the way also that the high-rise moves, the change in the section, the change the period of oscillation. So one part of contrast to the other, and you don't feel what is called the jerk. I think so that the acceleration of the speed, that is what creates this uneasy sensation in your body. At the same time, well, these are very old schemes. When the tunnel, I mean, were not digital simulation. These are schemes made in the 80s, I think, testing different shapes in tunnel things. So obviously the cylinder or those that don't have like sharp edge corners have a better performance. Well, an homage to our grandfather. A very beautiful project. And this is what we began to deal with in Paris when they asked us, a group of architects, to try to come to bring back to Paris the idea of a high-rise as an interesting possibility to live in. I continue. To live in. So we had different places. Ours was fantastic. It's horrible, as you see, it's a horrible mess of infrastructures, but we are used to deal with this stuff. But it was a beautiful one historically. It's the periphery, crossed by the Roman path that connects Notre Dame and Saint Denis. So in a way, it's a Roman axe in a mess, a labyrinth of cemeteries, stations, warehouses, etc., etc. We just wanted to work from the very beginning as a kind of ambiguous status for we know that the Montparnasse Tower and others are hated by Parisians. So we decided to work with the topography and with wind. So the first thing we worked with was the rows of winds, how the wind affects the structure, and also the topography. We didn't want to be in the city. We have the Montmartre and the Ville Chaumont is to the right, two kind of mountains, and we're in the middle, it's in the valley. And then we began to test the height with other high rises or similar structures in Paris. We decided that we were so close to Montmartre, and this combination of a natural heat with domes was interesting for us. We made some, the transformation of the compact to the bundle of towers in the second drawing. In the right side is very clear, and how smooth transformation would bring a kind of topographical status or a kind of ambiguous status to our project. Some very simple models testing the possibility of cantilevering more or less and how to deal with this. And this is again a kind of internal stomach. Came to the lower part of the tower and a public program. And we discovered that we were in this site. It was the urban plan wanted to have a campus, a university campus, and we decided that it was a wonderful idea exactly because of this thermomixer principle, the combination of different activities during the cycle of day would bring a kind of autonomy, internal neutral autonomy in terms of energy. So, well, I mean, it's also it's a combination of an iconic, I would say a very iconic take on the idea of high rise, but at the same time it has a kind of performance that is a combination of different activities. And a very simple, also from the point of tectonics, a very simple, well, I'm not going to explain a very simple structure. That splits into 4 towers or 2 reds up in a way it has in mind the heritage of the other metro project, but it develops it further with a clear, simple geometrical game that respects all the rules of thermodynamism and all the structural rules that can be respected. And then, at the same time, with the same sketch, the same Frankenstein, we were dealing with a social housing project in Valencia in a completely different context. In Valencia is much more like, let's say, Mediterranean and sunny, and social housing is not a campus. But we were interested in this concentration of ornament in the top as a key part of the drawing. So the idea that you can concentrate all the complexities in just the upper part, which is obviously in La Giralda of Spain, also the La Giralda of Martin, Mead and White in Madison Square Garden, which is at the left of part of it, was the key element in almost every deco skyscraper in the States. The concentration of ornament and variation in the areas your gaze naturally goes, somatically I would say goes. And well, this is Valencia, the port, the Mediterranean Sea, the Albufera Lake, and the red is a neighborhood called Sociopolis, which is a new neighborhood. These were like the first drawings. This is a model that obviously has not the complexity of social housing. You have to deal with very little budget. I mean, everywhere in the world, and Spanish for themselves. But we could really concentrate in this and try to extract an identity and forget all the moralism implicit in Europe to social housing, that it has to be straight, simple, serious, boring, and try to give a kind of dignity. So the dignity of saying I live there. And also it's not just a figural thing, it's also trying to establish variation within a kind of repetitive pattern. So we had at the end 22 different apartment types. It has been an amazing success, especially in the critical financial situation of Spain. Everyone has been sold out immediately. Well, this is stuff, the construction techniques. when to go. And this is, I mean, the effect on the area which still has farmlands and how it becomes. Supposedly it's part of a neighborhood. The lower building tries to establish a negotiation with a building that hopefully will come to the left side of the end. But I mean, it has been the only one that has been finished because of this crisis. So we hope that all these things will be solved soon, hopefully. We cross fingers. But the idea is to establish a very simple construction system, so that the cameras and modular windows, but trying to at the same time live with sun, brightness, complexity, and simplicity at the same time. So this is an aluminum sheet that reflects the radiation and allow us to negotiate very well the beauty of the. I mean, we began with a client that didn't care at all with sustainable issues, and we convinced them to make changes without changing the budget, and now they had a huge amount of money won given by the government because they have the highest qualification in the whole east area of Spain. Well, I'm not going to explain this, but it's important also that you can I mean, there are all these metrics of leads. I'm not interested at all, but at the same time, they are a good resource to bring clients into some kind of consciousness and to leave them play a role in some cases. And then, well, I mean, this is social housing, and this can be shown. I don't say it's a wonderful thing, but it's not that easy to show the theory of social. The access is in between these two volumes that really narrow it by the pressure and the containment of form. And with this image, I think you have enough of our ideas. I've been trying to explain, we have been trying to explain these ideas of somatism, the idea of which kind of things can be brought into discussion to develop the typology of the skyscraper and the high-rise, so to say. Also the idea of materialism that can be more complex than all those like projects we are used to. Obviously, I mean, our practice is evolving, and in this moment we have new projects that will develop these things deeper, but anyhow, you have always been dealing with these two tensions, the capacity to imagine other scenarios and the fragility and the contingencies of real practice. Thank you very much.
Anybody want to ask a question? No question.
With your move, so to speak, or hybridization of the office to the East Coast, what do you think about the ways in which, let's say, American education has, let's say, affected not only education in Europe, but also architects practicing, and maybe the reverse flow? So perhaps to kind of talk about this kind of continental practice that may emerge, and to a certain extent maybe even some reflections on the kind of U.S. culture that you're going to find yourself immersed in.
Well, I can just make a very brief comment on that. I don't want to pretend to know everything. But our take on the take in particular is I mean, to resume, I think that knowledge is critical in this moment in education. I think that when I talk about knowledge, I know about scientific knowledge. I think that the polytechnical tradition is more rich. I mean, due to the development of new technologies, in every field, and due to the respect that other professionals that are competing with us in the same territory, like environmental engineers, mechanical engineers, have reached, I think that scientific knowledge has to be delivered more consistently to resume, I think my take on the relationship between European education versus American is that the Vox Art Bauhaus tradition, American tradition, is okay for the last terms, and the first should be for things. I think, my comment is always the same. I've heard, for example, talking about thermodynamics, I've heard hundreds of times in different schools talks, comments on entropy, but never anyone saying which parameters are embedded in the formula of it's always using a kind of metaphorical understanding of this word. And students now work algorithmically. I mean, they really can be creative using algorithms, and they need the formulas, and they need to know the principles, and they need to operate together. So in a way, I mean, I see that there is a kind of frustration, a kind of difficulty in sharing languages or lexicons, and this is why I think that it's important to come back to the discussion of this kind of knowledge is delivered and how it is delivered. The other thing is, and very close to it, is the skepticism about the let's say the uncritical use of software of any kind. There are, like at the GSD, have been studies on the mistakes made by the students using Ecotech with very simple, in thermodynamic terms, in terms of shadow, radiation, etc. Very simple. Studies made with studies of students of MR1, MR2. And the level of mistake is 400%. I mean, it's serious. So if you don't have any basis, if you don't know what you are expecting to obtain, because you have done this and that, so it will be good in summer but very bad in winter, or you don't know if this will fall back in terms of wind but not in terms of gravitation. If you don't know these basics, to develop a kind of intuition, a kind of holistic intuition, which is what always we've been dealing with tectonics. I mean, every architect, more or less, every student at the end of the studies know how to make the dimensions for whatever in a competition at least you can calculate. You have this kind of knowledge of how things perform and which forces are activated. I think that this has to be spread a little bit with thermodynamics and try to establish a kind of more critical take on every stages of design.
Maybe one more question?
I think your project talks a lot about thermodynamics, the wind load and deflection, those stuff. And I just have a question: when you think when the technology becomes increasingly important in a high-rise building, do you think, in the other hand, you will limit our creativity in terms of geometry, because all those shapes and all those design are restricted by those laws governed by thermodynamics?
I think that one of the reasons why I am interested in increasing, let's say, technical knowledge is because I'm completely sure that the more productive dialogues with a good structural engineer come from architects that know how to deal with the structural shapes. The more productive relationships with environmental engineers come from architects that really know the basics of thermodynamics, and so on and so on. So, in a way, I think that the more familiarized we become with new technologies and new knowledges, the more productive and more complex our projects can become. But complex is a bad word. No? You can become, you can in a way, become hyper-complex with very simple geometries and very simple shapes. And sometimes this is the most mature response. When you are able to respond to, let's say, 2, 3, 4 different problems, radiation, daylight, structural calculation, with just super simple geometries, with super simple understanding where the materials have to be, which materials, how they conduct forces, how they conduct energy flows, and trying to synthesize. It has always been the same. I mean, knowledge is about finding the most elegant formulas, and the most elegant formulas are always the most simple formulas. It's not for architects, it's for, I mean, let's say, mathematicians and everyone. So complexity doesn't mean formal complexity. It means the capacity to respond to many questions in a synthetical way.
Okay, please give another round of applause.